Young lady gave her last $20 to a simple man at the train station, unaware he's a billionaire. At the edge of a crowded train station, a young lady named Tasha waited, lost in thought. Her purse was nearly empty, just $20 left to last her the week. That bill was all she had left, and she didn't even know if she'd spend it on food or fare later. She only knew she wouldn't be seeing another paycheck anytime soon. Her boss at the cafe had let her go 2 nights ago. "Sorry, we're cutting back," he'd said, not meeting her eyes. Before we go further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this one. Across the platform, unnoticed by most, sat an elderly man on a splintered bench. His shoes were worn, one sole flapping at the front. His coat hung on him like it had survived 2 wars and a flood. His posture was still, but not peaceful. Not defeated either. Just tired. Tasha noticed him the moment she arrived. Not because he did anything to attract attention, he didn't. That was what made him stand out. In a world where everyone fought to be seen, he sat as if he expected to be invisible. She tried not to stare. The man hadn't moved. Not once. No cup for coins. No handout. Just his fingers resting on his lap, pale and stiff. His eyes scanned the crowd, slowly. Not begging, not pleading, just watching. And somehow, she felt watched too. Not in a threatening way, but in a way that unsettled her. She turned away, focusing on the tracks, the chill, the ache in her jaw. Then glanced back. He was still watching. Their eyes met for half a second. Something flickered in his gaze. Was it sorrow? Resignation? Or something else entirely? She couldn't tell, but it burrowed into her mind and refused to let go. A teenage couple laughed behind her, nudging each other playfully. A man in a tailored coat shouted into his phone. The tannoy crackled with the same delay announcements as always. Life went on, indifferent and mechanical. But for Tasha, time slowed. She looked down at her bag. Her fingers found the 20 again. She rubbed it between her fingers, soft like cloth from wear. Then she looked back at him. She didn't want to make a scene. Didn't want anyone watching her. She walked over as if she were checking the map on the wall behind him. Stopped. Took a breath. Then sat down beside him without a word. Up close, he smelled faintly of the street, smoke, dust, something metallic. But beneath it, something else lingered. A trace of aftershave, maybe. Familiar. He didn't speak. "Have you eaten?" she asked softly. The man turned to her slowly. His lips twitched at the edges, as if forming a smile he'd forgotten how to wear. He looked like someone who once had stories to tell but hadn't been asked in a long time. "I'm all right," he said, barely a whisper. Tasha nodded. But she knew he wasn't. Neither was she, if she was being honest. Still, something in her heart stirred. A kind of fire that didn't burn, but warmed. Without saying more, she reached into her bag, unfolded the 20, and held it out to him. "Buy something warm," she said. "Please." He stared at her hand. Not with greed. Not even with gratitude. With disbelief. As if no one had ever done something so absurd before. His hand trembled as he took the note. "Thank you," he whispered, finally meeting her eyes again. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said, standing. "That's why I did." The train roared in. The crowd surged. She stepped away, melted into the boarding mass, found a seat near the window, and stared out as the platform faded behind her. She didn't feel like a hero. Didn't even feel good. She just felt quiet. Had she done something foolish? That money was supposed to be for emergencies. But something inside her told her this had been one. Tasha pressed her forehead to the glass, the world rushing past in blurred streaks of gray and silver. She never even asked his name. He hadn't moved. 20 minutes, maybe more. Not a shift, not a word, just stillness. The kind that clings to someone when they've long stopped expecting anything to change. Tasha stood a few feet away, arms folded tightly across her chest, pretending to watch the digital clock above the platform. Her eyes, though, drifted to the man again. He sat hunched forward on the bench, elbows resting on his knees, head bowed slightly, as if listening to a distant sound only he could hear. The world passed him by. Loud, restless, and in a hurry. Shoes clicked, announcements blared, conversations rose and faded. No one stopped. No one looked. He might as well have been carved into the bench. Forgotten. It bothered her. Not just his presence, but the silence surrounding him. He didn't beg. Didn't extend a hand. Didn't meet a single gaze. And somehow, that quiet disarmed her more than if he had shouted. His hands trembled. Not the shiver of age, but something deeper, starvation, maybe. Or exhaustion. Fingers curled slightly, nails uneven. One sleeve of his coat had been mended with a strip of twine. His pants were frayed at the hem, shoes coated in the kind of dust that doesn't come from a single day's walk. Yet he sat with dignity, upright, composed, eyes closed now, or nearly so. Tasha couldn't tell from where she stood. Still, she felt watched again, not in the way one feels preyed upon, but noticed, recognized. She looked away quickly. What was it about him? She'd seen people like this before. Cities were full of ghosts like him. They're one moment, gone the next, swallowed into the blur of survival. But this man, he anchored something in her. Something she hadn't planned to feel today. The cold crept into her bones, but she didn't move. She'd seen enough to guess the story. Not all of it, but pieces. The hunger. The worn clothing. The refusal to ask. He wasn't trying to make people feel sorry. That would have been easier. But his silence demanded more. Respect, maybe. Or memory. Her fingers clenched the strap of her backpack. She could just turn away. It wasn't her problem. She didn't even have enough for herself. And she'd done her part, hadn't she? Noticing was something. But she didn't walk away. Instead, she took one cautious step forward, then another. The voices around her softened. Her breath caught in her throat. 3 feet. 2. He didn't move. But his eyes opened. Not wide, just enough. They locked eyes. It wasn't long. A second. 2. But it held weight. His gaze wasn't sharp, nor pleading. It was calm, tired, and heavy with something that pulled at her ribs, like an echo from a part of herself she kept buried. He looked like someone who had once believed in people, who still might. Tasha's throat tightened. She couldn't explain it, but something about him felt familiar. Not his face. She was sure she'd never seen him before. But that expression, that deep, wordless sadness. She knew it, not from the outside looking in, but from the inside clawing out. It was the way she looked on the worst days, when hope thinned to a thread, and she smiled only to keep from unraveling. Still, she hesitated. Approaching mid-involvement. A risk. Maybe rejection. Or maybe it would open a door she wasn't ready to step through. But standing still felt worse now. She took another step. He blinked slowly, his gaze never flinching. It wasn't an invitation. But it wasn't a dismissal either. That subtle in-between made her pause. She wanted to say something, anything, but words caught behind her teeth. What was she even doing? This wasn't like her. She wasn't the kind of person who got involved in strangers' lives. But maybe she wanted to be. The wind shifted. A crumpled receipt blew between them and fluttered off the platform's edge. Still, the man didn't move. His lips were cracked. His jaw thin. His beard short, but unkempt. There was something composed in the messiness. Something oddly deliberate. She imagined his story. A man once successful, maybe. A man who lost everything. Or maybe he'd never had anything to lose in the first place. She didn't know. And for once, the not knowing didn't frustrate her. It intrigued her. What mattered more was the question forming in her mind. If I walk away now, will I forget him in an hour? A day? Or will this moment follow me forever? She inched closer. Still silent. Still watching. And in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. A thread. Fragile, invisible, real. She didn't know him. Didn't know his name, his past, his truth. But she knew the weight in his eyes. Because once, more than once, she'd seen it in the mirror. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure if she was standing before a stranger or a reflection. Tasha didn't decide to move. Her feet did. One moment she stood staring, uncertain. The next, she was kneeling beside him. The cold from the concrete seeped through her jeans, but she barely noticed. She was close enough now to hear his shallow breathing, see the raw skin at the corners of his mouth. He didn't flinch, didn't look up at first. Just sat still, like the world around him had stopped mattering a long time ago. "Have you eaten today?" she asked, her voice soft, careful not to startle him. The question broke something. His eyes flicked toward hers, startled. For a second, confusion passed over his face, then something else. A flicker of vulnerability he clearly didn't want seen. He gave the smallest nod, then shook his head. "I'll be all right," he murmured, looking down again. But he wouldn't be. Anyone could see that. The line between pride and pain was thin, and he was straddling it with everything he had left. Tasha didn't press him. She simply stayed there, crouched beside him, heart thudding not from fear, but from the weight of the choice before her. She knew what she had. A single, worn $20 bill tucked into the inner pocket of her purse. The last of everything. It was meant for a cheap dinner. Maybe a few train rides until she figured out her next move. Not enough for security. Barely enough for survival. She slipped the purse from her shoulder and rested it in her lap. Unsnapped the clasp. Her fingers trembled, though not from the cold this time. She stared at the bill, folded neatly like it mattered more than it did. And it did. It mattered enough to make her hesitate. But across from her was a man who hadn't eaten, who had said he'd be all right, and clearly wouldn't be, who had sat through 1,000 people rushing past, and never once held out his hand. That silence, it moved her more than 100 pleas could have. Without a word, she reached out and placed the bill in his hand. Not with a flourish, not expecting anything in return, just quietly, sincerely. "Please eat something warm," she whispered. He looked down at his hand, not immediately closing his fingers around it, as if he thought it might vanish. Then his eyes met hers again, and this time, they stayed there. He stared not like someone seeing charity, but like someone witnessing something sacred. His lips parted, but no sound came. Gratitude lived in that silence, deep and fragile. She didn't need him to say anything. He glanced around, as if checking that no one else had seen, that this kindness could remain theirs alone. No applause. No crowd turning to witness a selfless act. Just commuters, lost in their routines, blind to the exchange happening beside them. And in a way that made it purer. There were no expectations here. No strings. Just one human being offering hope to another. In a world starved of compassion, it felt profound. He finally closed his hand around the bill, slowly, almost reverently. His fingers gripped it like it might be the first warmth he'd felt in days. "I don't know your name," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Tasha," she replied. He nodded once. "Thank you, Tasha." It was all he said. It was enough. She rose to her feet slowly, her knees stiff from kneeling. He didn't look away. Neither did she. They stood strangers still, but changed somehow, connected by that brief, wordless moment. A moment that neither would forget. Tasha stepped back, sliding the purse over her shoulder again. She didn't feel lighter, exactly. But she did feel clearer. She had given away something she desperately needed. Yet it didn't feel like a loss. It felt right. Not heroic. Not brave. Just human. She turned to walk away, resisting the urge to look back. She didn't need to. The moment had already carved itself into her memory. The look in his eyes. The trembling of his hand. The quiet thank you that had carried more weight than anything spoken that day. And as she rejoined the moving crowd, one thought echoed in her mind. Not a regret, not a question, just a quiet truth. Sometimes, the smallest kindnesses are the ones that matter most. The train doors slid shut with a soft hiss behind her, sealing the moment in the station like a page being turned. Tasha moved down the aisle, each step heavier than she expected, her eyes searching for solitude. She slipped into a window seat, pressed her back into the cold vinyl, and exhaled slowly. Outside, the platform looked distant already, like something that belonged to someone else. She folded her arms across her chest, more out of habit than warmth, and turned to the window. The man on the bench was still there, smaller now from the distance, hunched and unmoving, almost swallowed by the crowd again. The train groaned, then rolled forward. Slowly at first, then faster. The station began to slide away. He didn't look up. She kept her gaze locked on him until he became a smudge, then a blur, then nothing. Gone. And with him, a strange ache settled in her chest. It wasn't regret. Not fully. But it wasn't peace either. She leaned her forehead against the window, letting the cool glass soothe her. The city blurred past, trees and signs and buildings bleeding into each other. But she didn't see any of it. Her thoughts were still back on that bench. Did it matter that she didn't ask his name? Did kindness need names? She didn't know. She only knew that something inside her felt unfinished. Her stomach twisted, not with hunger. The $20 could have stretched her through the weekend, maybe bought her a few bus rides, a cheap sandwich. But she wasn't second-guessing the act. She was second-guessing the silence that followed it. No final words. No closure. Just a quiet exchange, and then the inevitable motion of time pulling her away. Had it changed anything? For him? For her? She pulled her bag closer and unzipped the front pocket out of reflex, though she knew it was empty. The absence of that bill was small, but noticeable. It had weight, like the phantom of something once held tightly. Tasha closed her eyes for a moment. Maybe she was foolish. Giving away her last bit of money to a stranger on a bench, no matter how noble it felt in the moment, wouldn't pay her rent or land her a new job. But it had felt necessary. Still, the doubt lingered. The train rocked gently, metal screeching faintly against the rails. Passengers around her were immersed in their own distractions, phones, Books, idle stares. No one noticed her silence. No one noticed the way she clenched her jaw, as if holding something back. She wanted to believe that she wouldn't think about this moment for long, that the world would keep moving and she'd forget the look in his eyes. But deep down, she knew better. There was something haunting about it, not in a frightening way, just in its quiet depth. It reminded her of the way people in photographs look when they don't know they're being seen, unguarded, real. She pressed her fingertips to her temples. Maybe she should have said more, sat beside him longer, asked who he was, why he was there. But she hadn't. And now, he was behind her. Quite literally. She watched the scenery shift, bridges, rooftops, a river snaking through the outskirts of the city. The world was changing again, but the stillness from the platform clung to her like a shadow. She told herself she had done what she could. She had given something, however small. That should have been enough. And yet, there was a strange finality to not knowing his name, like losing a memory before it's even finished forming. She adjusted in her seat, suddenly restless. Her fingers tapped softly against her thigh. Her reflection in the window stared back at her, tired, but thoughtful. A young woman who had made a hard choice in a hard world. Would he remember her? Would he think of her as just another passing kindness, gone too quickly to hold on to? Maybe. Or maybe she was thinking too much. She had her own life to manage, her own problems to fix. And that's what she told herself, over and over, as the train sped farther from the station. Still, the image of him lingered. The worn coat, the quiet dignity, the way he had looked at her, not with desperation, but with something harder to define. A quiet, stunned reverence. Like someone being seen for the first time in a long while. And now, he was gone. Just a moment. A forgotten minute in a long day. She forced herself to straighten up, blinked against the thoughts, and stared ahead. There was no going back. No replaying that encounter. It was done. A goodbye to a stranger, without a name. Without a promise. She whispered to herself, too quiet for anyone to hear, I hope he's okay. And then she looked forward. Because life, relentless as ever, was already pulling her toward the next stop. The cafe was busy, the usual hum of conversation filling the air, but Tasha barely noticed. She sat in a corner booth, scrolling through social media on her phone, a distraction to fill the quiet spaces between her thoughts. Her friend's leftover coffee had gone cold, but she kept sipping it, not caring. The warm bitterness was enough to keep her grounded, a small comfort amid the storm of uncertainty that had been her life for the past few days. The train ride, the man on the bench, the $20, it all felt so far away now. A fleeting moment, a small act of kindness. She had almost convinced herself that it didn't matter. Life moved on, after all. The world didn't slow for a stranger's generosity, and neither did hers. Then she froze. Her finger paused mid-scroll as her eyes locked onto a headline. It was bold, sensational, and it pulled her in like gravity. Billionaire disguised as homeless man rewards woman's kindness. Tasha blinked. The words didn't immediately register. She glanced at the photo accompanying the headline. A crisp, clear image of the same man she'd seen days ago on the bench. He was standing tall now, a sharp suit replacing the tattered coat, a smile on his face as he posed with reporters. Clean-shaven, his hair neatly styled, he looked like a completely different person. But those eyes, those same eyes, stared back at her. Jonathan Rhys. Her heart thudded against her ribs. She barely noticed the sting of the cold coffee cup slipping from her hand, the cup clattering against the table as she stood up, her legs unsteady. She didn't hear the chatter around her. The world blurred, all her focus narrowing on the words beneath the image. Jonathan Rhys, the reclusive tech billionaire who had disappeared from public life years ago, the article read. For months, he had been testing humanity, searching for someone genuine, someone who still believed in kindness in a world that had forgotten it. The weight of the words hung in the air as Tasha's mind reeled. She was looking at the same man. The man she had helped, without hesitation, without knowing who he was. And now here he was, staring at her from the screen, a story unfolding around him that she had never imagined. Her eyes skimmed the article, the words starting to blur together as her heart beat faster. There was no mention of her name, no acknowledgement of her. But then, her eyes caught something that made her stomach twist. Her face. In the corner of the photo, blurred but unmistakable, was her face. Her face, caught in the moment when she'd handed him the last of her money. It was there, just beyond the line of his shoulder, the image fuzzy but familiar. Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't just a passerby. She wasn't just a nameless face in the crowd. She was the woman, the one he had chosen. The one who had shown him kindness when no one else had. Her phone slipped from her hands, landing with a soft thud on the table. She barely noticed. She had no idea. Tasha's mind was spinning. The pieces of the story she had barely thought about were suddenly clicking into place. The way he had looked at her. The way his eyes had held that quiet sadness, as if he hadn't expected anyone to see him. She had thought he was just a stranger. But he had been watching her, testing her, measuring something more than the kindness she had offered. She rubbed her forehead, feeling the weight of it all. A billionaire. It wasn't just a story. It was real. It was happening. And somehow, she had been a part of it. But the question gnawed at her. Why her? Why had he chosen her? What had he seen in her that made her different from anyone else? Was it just the way she had treated him? Or was there something more? Her thoughts raced, spiraling in every direction. She had given him everything she had in that moment, but she hadn't expected anything in return. In fact, she had told herself not to expect anything. Yet here she was, staring at a headline that felt like a dream. Tasha sat back down slowly, the world around her still buzzing with activity, but all she could hear was the pounding of her heart. The man she had helped, the man who had been a stranger to her, was someone completely different. Someone who had the power to change her life in ways she couldn't even begin to understand. She had been part of something bigger than herself. But what did that mean for her now? What did it mean for the choices she had made? Could she have done more? Could she have known more? Her phone vibrated, breaking her from her thoughts. The screen lit up with a notification. She reached for it automatically, not sure what to expect. It was a message from a number she didn't recognize. Thank you, Tasha. You've reminded me that humanity still has a heart. I won't forget your kindness. Her breath hitched. She knew, without a doubt, that it was from him. She wasn't sure what to feel, what to think. But the one thing she knew for sure was that nothing in her life would ever be the same again. That evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Tasha was curled up on her couch, her mind still replaying the revelation from earlier. She was trying and failing to wrap her head around the unexpected turn her life had taken. The cafe, the article, the message, it all felt like a whirlwind, like a dream she was yet to wake up from. Then, the knock came. At first, Tasha hesitated. Who could it be at this hour? She hadn't been expecting anyone. She stood, pacing for a moment before walking toward the door. The apartment felt unnervingly quiet, the only sound the faint buzz of her fridge. She glanced through the peephole, then her breath caught. A well-dressed man stood on the other side, holding a small envelope in his hand. His suit was sharp, crisp. He had kind eyes, the kind of eyes that didn't make her feel judged, only welcomed. He smiled when she opened the door. Miss Tasha, he said softly. His voice was calm, steady. Mr. Reese would like to meet you. Confusion twisted in Tasha's gut. Jonathan Reese? The billionaire? She barely knew how to respond. Her mind raced, and for a brief moment, she considered shutting the door, but something inside urged her to stay. To hear him out. I don't understand, she said, voice trembling despite her attempts at composure. What's this about? The man nodded, understanding her hesitation. Mr. Reese appreciates your kindness, your actions. He would like to meet you in person, if you're willing. Tasha didn't know what to think. Her heart was pounding, her breath quickening, but she nodded before she even realized it. All right, she managed, her voice hoarse. I'll go. A quiet drive later, Tasha found herself at the gates of a quiet estate on the outskirts of the city. The neighborhood was far removed from the hustle and bustle she was used to, quiet streets, stately homes hidden behind tall gates, and sprawling lawns. The man who had knocked on her door earlier drove with assured ease, but Tasha felt the knot in her stomach tighten with each passing mile. When they finally stopped in front of an elegant house, she felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. She stepped out, and the man led her to the door with a gentle smile. Inside, the house was just as refined as the exterior, tastefully decorated, with soft lighting and a calm atmosphere that immediately put her on edge. It felt like stepping into another world, one she had never imagined for herself. And then she saw him. Jonathan Reese stood by the fireplace, his back to her, a figure of quiet strength and poise. His appearance was starkly different from the man she had met at the station. No worn clothes, no hunched posture. He was dressed sharply, the epitome of a wealthy businessman. But when he turned and saw her, she recognized him immediately. His eyes, still holding that same depth, that same kindness, locked with hers. He smiled. "Miss Tasha," he said, his voice warm and inviting. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." Tasha stood frozen, unsure what to do or say. She had imagined this moment in 1,000 ways since the article, but nothing felt real until now. He took a step forward, extending his hand. "I can never thank you enough for what you did. Not just for the money, but for seeing me. For seeing someone who had been lost, someone no one cared to notice. You gave me more than just help. You gave me hope." She shook his hand, unsure how to respond. Her mind was racing, but the words wouldn't come. Jonathan reached for a folder on the table beside him and handed it to her. "I've arranged something for you. For your kindness." Tasha opened the folder carefully, her hands trembling. Inside, there were 3 things. A scholarship, full tuition, it seemed. A job offer with a company that sounded too good to be true. And finally, a set of keys. Her breath caught. The keys were to an apartment. A new place, in a part of the city she had only ever dreamed of. She didn't cry. Not yet. But she could feel it, the weight of it all crashing in, her chest tightening. She wasn't sure how to handle it, how to process the sudden shift in her life. Jonathan watched her closely, his expression soft but serious. "These are just the beginning. A small gesture, but one that I hope will open doors for you." Tasha didn't know how to respond. She couldn't speak, not with the flood of emotions threatening to spill over. But as she looked up at him, she realized something. No matter how impossible it seemed, this wasn't just about money. It was about recognizing a person's worth, even when the world had forgotten to. She nodded slowly, the weight of the folder still in her hands. "Thank you," she finally whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life had just changed forever. Weeks passed, and with each day, Tasha settled more comfortably into her new life. The apartment she had once only dreamed of now felt like home. Its walls, bright and clean, reflected her newfound stability, but it was more than just a place to live. It was the start of something, a fresh beginning that she never expected, yet here she was. This morning was different. Today was her first day at the internship she had been offered at one of Jonathan Reese's firms. She stood outside the building, her breath visible in the crisp air. The weight of the moment settled in her chest. This was real. The girl who had once given away her last $20 was now walking into a world that felt too vast to grasp all at once. She wore her best outfit, a modest but professional dress and a small smile. Tasha wasn't one to stand out. She never had been. She wasn't the kind of person who wanted the spotlight. It had never been about recognition. It was about the small, quiet moments of kindness that could make a difference in someone's life. That had always been her belief. But even as she walked with purpose, her heart swelled with an unfamiliar pride. She had come a long way since that cold morning at the train station. And yet, as much as things had changed, she hadn't changed where it mattered. The world could offer her fame or fortune, but it couldn't take away who she was. Inside the firm, she was just another intern at first, blending in with the rest. But her story, the one that had begun with a small act of kindness, spread quickly, finding its way to social media, to news outlets. Headlines with her name, her face, shared thousands of times. They told the story of the woman who had seen a man when no one else would, who had given what she had, asking for nothing in return. Her story reached millions, inspiring people from all walks of life. She became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the toughest of times, humanity still had a spark. But Tasha remained humble. She didn't see herself as anything extraordinary. She didn't need a platform to feel validated. For her, it had never been about the reward or the recognition. It had been about staying true to who she was, even when the world tried to push her into a corner. It had been about being human in a world that sometimes forgot to be. She helped where she could, whether it was offering a kind word to a colleague or giving a stranger the time of day. People came to her for advice, for support, and she gave it freely. She never stopped noticing those around her, the ones who were often ignored, the ones who didn't have a voice. She remained the same Tasha, the one who had once sat alone at the train station, unsure of what her future held, but certain of one thing: kindness was never a waste. Her story continued to inspire. As her career grew, she used her position not for power or prestige, but for good. She reached out to those who needed help, volunteered her time, and reminded others that kindness wasn't a commodity, it was something everyone could afford to give. Slowly, the firm began to mirror her values, as more and more people followed her lead. seeing in her the example of what it meant to care for others. But on a quiet day, months after the whirlwind had passed, Tasha stood outside, looking at the same train station she had once walked through without much thought. She found herself drawn to the bench, the place where it had all started. She smiled softly, remembering the moment she had shared with the man who had changed everything for her. But the bench was empty now, just as it had been when she had first seen it. Yet, in a way, it wasn't forgotten. Her story had come full circle. It had begun there, on that very spot. And now, though the bench was still empty, it held a quiet significance. It was no longer just a forgotten place. It was a marker, a symbol of everything that had changed for her. As she turned to leave, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The world hadn't forgotten, and neither had she. If you enjoyed this story, ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing, heartfelt stories like this. Also, let us know where you are watching from, and drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.